I still remember the day the humans arrived in our sector. We thought they were simple, brutish creatures who relied on luck rather than strategy. We were wrong. Catastrophically wrong. My name is Vorath, and I serve as a military analyst for the Krell Dominion, the greatest empire this side of the Andromeda Gateway, or at least we were the greatest until we decided to pick a fight with Earth. The war had been going well for us. Too well, actually, which should have been the first warning sign. But hubris is a universal constant, even among species who pride themselves on logic and tactical superiority. 3 cycles ago, our forces captured 3 of humanity's most decorated military leaders during a raid on their forward command station near the Theta Nebula: General Marcus Flynn, General Keiko Tanaka, and General Ahmed Hassan. The propaganda value alone was worth 10 battle victories. High Command practically salivated at the opportunity. We will make an example of them, Supreme Commander Grath announced during the War Council meeting. His mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among my people. A public execution broadcast across every human colony. They will see their heroes fall, and their spirit will break. I sat in the back of that chamber, reviewing tactical data on my holographic display. Something about the capture bothered me. The humans had fought viciously for every centimeter of space since hostilities began. They employed guerrilla tactics, unconventional warfare, and had this unsettling habit of winning battles they had no business surviving. Yet these 3 generals had been taken with minimal resistance. Honored Commander, I ventured, knowing full well I might be relegated to waste processing duty for speaking out of turn. Does it not strike you as unusual that we captured these high-value targets so easily? Grath's compound eyes swiveled toward me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Are you questioning the competence of our assault teams, Analyst Vorath? Not at all, Supreme Commander. I merely suggest that humans have demonstrated tactical cunning throughout this conflict. Perhaps we should interrogate the prisoners extensively before proceeding with any execution plans. Grath's thorax expanded, a sign of irritation. Your caution is noted and dismissed. Humans grow desperate. They make mistakes. We capitalize on those mistakes. That is war. Analyst, perhaps you should return to your data screens and leave strategy to those qualified to conduct it. Laughter rippled through the assembled commanders. I lowered my sensory stalks in submission and said nothing more. But I did not stop analyzing the data. The execution was scheduled for the peak viewing period, timed to broadcast simultaneously across all human-inhabited worlds. The Dominion spared no expense on the spectacle. They erected a massive platform in the central plaza of Krell Prime, our capital world. Hovering camera drones positioned themselves at every angle. News feeds from 100 different networks competed for the best vantage points. The 3 human generals were brought out in restraints, surrounded by an entire battalion of our elite guards. They wore their military uniforms, though torn and stained from imprisonment. I watched from my assigned observation post, my analytical equipment recording every biometric reading I could capture. General Flynn was the tallest, with graying hair and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He walked with a slight limp, but kept his head high. General Tanaka was compact and efficient in her movements, her dark eyes constantly scanning the environment. General Hassan had the build of someone who had spent considerable time in high-gravity training, muscles dense and posture rigid. What struck me immediately was their lack of fear. Oh, they displayed appropriate wariness, alert to their surroundings, but there was no panic, no desperation. If anything, I detected what my human language database suggested might be grim satisfaction. Supreme Commander Grath took his position at the podium, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the artificial sunlight. The crowd of crazed citizens that had gathered numbered in the thousands, all eager to witness the downfall of our enemies. Citizens of the Dominion, Grath's voice boomed through the amplification system. Today marks a turning point in our righteous war against the human infestation. These 3 individuals commanded the forces that dared resist our expansion. They led the attacks on our colonies. They killed our warriors. And now they will pay the ultimate price for their defiance. The crowd roared approval. I adjusted my sensory inputs to filter out the noise and focused on the prisoners. General Flynn was smiling. Actually smiling. Before we carry out the sentence, Grath continued, does anyone wish to speak, to beg for mercy, to denounce their species and perhaps earn a swift death rather than a prolonged one? General Hassan stepped forward as much as his restraints allowed.
I have something to say.
The crowd quieted, eager to hear the human grovel. Your intelligence is worse than we calculated, Hassan said, his voice surprisingly strong for someone about to die, which is saying something because we calculated it was pretty terrible to begin with. Grath's mandibles twitched in anger. You dare insult the Dominion in your final moments? Oh, I dare quite a bit more than that, Hassan replied.
He glanced at his fellow generals.
How much longer do you figure? General Tanaka checked the chronometer built into her uniform sleeve, a device our security teams had apparently deemed harmless. Approximately 45 seconds. Excellent, General Flynn said. He looked directly at the nearest camera drone.
Hey folks, back home, if you are watching this, which I certainly hope you are, you might want to pay close attention to what happens next.
It is going to be educational. I felt my sensory stalks stiffen. Something was very wrong here. Enough of this nonsense, Grath signaled to the execution squad. Proceed with. That was when the sky caught fire. At first, I thought it was a malfunction with our atmospheric generators. Then my analytical equipment started screaming alerts. Dozens of objects were entering the upper atmosphere at velocities that should have been impossible. They were not burning up. They were coming in hot deliberately, wreathed in plasma and righteous fury. What is that? Someone in the crowd shouted. General Flynn's smile widened into a full grin. That would be the consequences of your actions arriving at terminal velocity. The objects resolved themselves into drop pods.
Hundreds of them. Thousands.
They hammered into the plaza with earth-shattering impacts, cratering the carefully maintained grounds and sending Krell citizens scrambling for cover. Each pod was easily 3 meters tall, constructed from some kind of ablative armor that still glowed red-hot from atmospheric entry. The restraints on the 3 generals suddenly deactivated. They fell to the ground with metallic clanks, some kind of remote release. Impossible, I muttered, watching my display screens fill with tactical data. The jamming fields should prevent any external signals. Should being the operative word, my assistant Kellick said from the next console. Orathak, we have a problem. A very large problem. The drop pods began to open. What emerged were not the lightly armored human soldiers we had been fighting across the frontier. These were something else entirely. They stood nearly 2.5 meters tall in their powered armor, each suit bristling with weapons that my database struggled to categorize. The armor itself seemed to shift and adapt, reactive camouflage flowing across its surface before settling into a matte black finish that seemed to absorb light. Heavy assault infantry, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I have heard rumors, but I thought they were psychological warfare. They are very real, Kellick confirmed. And they just deployed approximately 8,000 units directly into our capital. The human soldiers moved with terrifying efficiency. They formed defensive perimeters around the 3 generals within seconds. Their weapons trained on the Krell guards who were still trying to process what was happening. All units, engage the enemy. Grath screamed into his command channel. Eliminate the intruders. Kill the generals before they can escape. The Krell guards opened fire. Energy bolts that could punch through standard combat armor splashed harmlessly against the human heavy suits. The humans did not even flinch. Their armor plating is rated for ship-grade weapons, I said, reading the analysis, scrolling across my screen. Our small arms are completely ineffective. Then the humans returned fire. I had reviewed thousands of hours of combat footage during this war.
I thought I understood human weapons technology.
I was wrong about that too. The sound alone was devastating. A cacophony of explosive propellants and supersonic projectiles. Krell guards were torn apart, their exoskeletons offering no protection against the kinetic fury being unleashed. Fall back, someone screamed. Retreat to secondary positions. But there were no secondary positions. The humans had landed everywhere, creating an unbreakable perimeter around the execution platform. I watched in horror as our elite guards, warriors who had trained for decades, were systematically eliminated by soldiers who moved like they had been born in their armor. General Flynn walked calmly to the edge of the platform and picked up a discarded Krell rifle. He examined it with casual interest before tossing it aside. You know what I love about a good trap? The moment when your enemy realizes they have made a fundamental miscalculation. He looked directly at Supreme Commander Grath.
You wanted to make an example?
Well, congratulations, you succeeded, just not the example you intended. Grath's guards formed a protective circle around him, but even I could see it was futile. Human soldiers were advancing from all directions, their movements coordinated with inhuman precision. This is a violation of every rule of warfare. Grath sputtered. A sneak attack on our capital world. You will be condemned by every civilized species in the galaxy. General Tanaka laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You declared total war against humanity, remember? You said you would exterminate us. You broadcasted that declaration on every frequency. You made it very clear that this was a fight to extinction. She shrugged. So we decided to take you seriously. Besides, General Hassan added, we learned all about your rules of warfare from studying your previous conquests.
You do not follow them either.
You just expect everyone else to. Hypocrisy is not a good look, by the way. I was trying to process how this had happened. How had humanity managed to position an entire assault fleet close enough to deploy troops without our detection grid noticing? Our sensors covered light years in every direction. It should have been impossible. Unless... Kellex, pull up the sensor logs from the past week, I ordered. Focus on areas we classified as cosmic background noise. My assistant's manipulators flew across his console. Moments later, his sensory stalks went rigid. By the void, Vorthax, they were there the entire time. They masked their fleet signature to match the radiation from the nearby pulsar. Our automated systems filtered them out as environmental phenomena. They hid an entire invasion force in plain sight, I said. For days, maybe weeks, waiting for this exact moment. The implications were staggering. This level of planning, patience, and deception went against everything we thought we knew about human psychology. They were supposed to be impulsive, emotional, prone to rash action. They were not supposed to be capable of this kind of long-term strategic thinking. Down in the Plaza, the fighting had essentially ceased. The Krell forces were either dead, captured, or had wisely decided that discretion was the better part of valor, and withdrawn. The humans had achieved total tactical dominance in less than 10 minutes. A new sound filled the air, or more drop pods. But these were different, whole larger.
Ayy.
They landed with almost delicate precision.
And when they opened, out stepped individuals in lighter armor, but carrying sophisticated communication equipment.
Command units, Kellex observed. They are establishing a forward headquarters. One of the humans, a woman with silver rank insignia on her armor, approached the platform. She removed her helmet, revealing close-cropped blonde hair and eyes that could have flashed frozen helium. Generals Flynn, Tanaka, Hassan, she said, her voice carrying across the plaza despite not using amplification. Good to see you alive. I trust your accommodations were not too unpleasant. Nothing. 5-star hotels have been better, Flynn replied, but the room service was terrible, and do not even get me started on the thread count of the sheets. The woman smiled slightly. I will be sure to file a formal complaint. Supreme Commander Grath, I presume. Grath had been stripped of his ceremonial armor, and now stood surrounded by human soldiers. He said nothing. I'm Admiral Elizabeth Vance of the United Earth Coalition Fleet. As of this moment, Krell Prime is under human occupation. Your military command structure has been decapitated, your defensive fleet neutralized, and your communication networks are under our control. In short, you have lost. You cannot hold this world, Grath managed to say. Our empire spans hundreds of systems. Reinforcements will come. Actually, about that. Admiral Vance pulled out a data tablet. While you were preparing your little execution show, we were preparing shows of our own. 27 of your most strategically important worlds are currently experiencing similar drops. Your fleet assets have been scattered. Chasing ghost signatures and false intelligence we have been feeding you for months. Your supply lines are cut. Your communication relays are compromised. And your allies. She smiled. Well, let us just say that when we explained what you have been planning to do with them, after you finished with us, they suddenly became much less interested in supporting your war effort. I felt my respiratory spiracles constrict. This was not a battle. It was not even a war. It was a dissection. Executed with surgical precision. You see, Commander, General Hassan said, we humans have a saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You fooled the first 3 species you conquered by pretending to be reasonable right up until you were not. We studied those campaigns. We learned from them, and we decided to turn your own tactics against you. The capture was intentional. I breathed, suddenly understanding. You let yourselves be taken. General Tanaka glanced up at the observation post where I sat. Her eyes found mine across the distance with unnerving accuracy. Gold star for the analyst. Yes, We volunteered for this mission. Everything you thought you knew about our defensive positions, our fleet movements, our strategic priorities, all carefully crafted misinformation. We have been manipulating your intelligence gathering for months, feeding you exactly what you wanted to hear. But why? Grath demanded. Why go through this elaborate charade? You could have launched your attack at any time. Because you needed to gather here. Admiral Vance explained. All your major commanders, all in one place, feeling safe and superior while you prepared to murder prisoners for propaganda. We needed you overconfident, distracted, and concentrated. You were kind enough to do all three. General Flynn looked around at the assembled camera drones, most of which were still broadcasting. And because we wanted everyone to see this, every species you have been threatening, every civilization you have been planning to subjugate, every single being who thought humans were easy prey, we wanted them all to understand something very important. His expression hardened. We are not angry because you attacked us. We are angry because you made the galaxy think attacking us was a good idea. That ends now. The implications of his words hung in the air like a death sentence. This was not just about defeating the Krell Dominion. This was about establishing a precedent, a warning to every other species with expansionist ambitions. I looked at my display screens, at the tactical data still pouring in from across the planet. Human forces had seized every major population center. They had done it with minimal civilian casualties, I noted, which somehow made it even more terrifying. They had the capability to kill indiscriminately, but chose precision instead. That took discipline, control, a level of military sophistication that suggested this was not even close to their full capability. What happens now? Kellex asked quietly. I watched as the three generals who had been scheduled to die stood victorious on the execution platform, surrounded by an army that had appeared from nowhere and conquered our capital in less time than it took to eat a meal. Now, I said, now we find out what happens when you publicly execute human generals, and the trap springs. I suspect we are not going to enjoy the lesson. Human laughter echoed across the plaza, mixing with the distant sounds of drop pods still landing in other parts of the city. The execution was supposed to break humanity's spirit. Instead, it had broken ours. The following hours were a masterclass in military occupation conducted by a species we had dismissed as primitive warmongers. I watched from my observation post as human forces transformed our capital from a seat of imperial power into what they called a secured zone. The efficiency was almost insulting. Forath, you need to see this, Kellex said. His voice tight with something between fear and fascination. He transferred data to my primary screen. What I saw made my internal organs clench. The humans had not just captured Krell Prime, they had captured our entire command infrastructure intact. Every database, every strategic planning file, every communication log. They had bypassed our security protocols, like they were recreational puzzles designed for children. How is this possible? I muttered, scrolling through the access logs. These systems have quantum encryption. The keys change every microcycle. Even if they had unlimited computing power, it would take centuries to crack. They did not crack it, a voice said behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly fell out of my acceleration couch. Standing in the doorway of my observation post was General Tanaka, flanked by two of those armored soldiers. Up close they were even more intimidating. The armor seemed almost alive, subtle movements suggesting integrated systems I could not begin to understand. How did you get up here? This facility has restricted access. General Tanaka smiled. It was not unkind, which somehow made it worse. Your security chief gave us the access codes. Well, technically he gave them to us 3 weeks ago when we inserted an intelligence operative into his staff. He just did not know he was doing it at the time. He just did not know he was doing it at the time. My sensory stalks drooped in defeat. You have been inside our systems for weeks. Months, actually. She corrected, walking over to examine my equipment. Nice setup you have here. Multi-spectrum analysis, real-time battlefield coordination, predictive modeling. You are good at your job, Analyst Vorath, which is why I am here. To kill me? To recruit you. I stared at her. My translator must have malfunctioned. Excuse me? You were the only one in that War Council meeting who questioned the capture. The only one who saw the obvious trap. Your commanders dismissed you because recognizing human intelligence would mean acknowledging their own stupidity. She pulled up a chair, uninvited, and sat across from me. We have been monitoring your work. Your analysis of our tactical patterns was remarkably accurate. You predicted 3 of our operational strategies before we implemented them. If your superiors had listened to you, this invasion would have been significantly more difficult. I fail to see how this is relevant to my continued survival. Because wars end, analyst, eventually. And when they do, someone has to rebuild. Someone has to establish new relationships. Someone has to make sure the galaxy understands what happened here and why it can never happen again. General Tanaka leaned forward. We need people like you. People who can think beyond propaganda and pride. People who can see reality even when it is uncomfortable. You want me to betray my people. Your people are the Krell species, not the Krell Dominion. There is a difference. The Dominion is a political structure built on conquest and subjugation. Your species? They are just trying to survive like everyone else. Once we dismantle the power structure that started this war, your people will still need advocates, leaders, analysts who can help them navigate a very different galaxy. The Ray considered her words. Outside, I could see human soldiers directing Krell civilians to safety zones, providing medical aid, distributing supply rations. They were not pillaging. They were not massacring. They were occupying with a level of organization that suggested they had planned for post-conflict operations as meticulously as they had planned the invasion itself. What guarantees do I have that humanity will not simply replace the Dominion as the new oppressors? None, General Tanaka said bluntly. Whole will have to trust that we learned something from the last century of Earth history. We know what happens when victors become tyrants. We know the cost of that mistake. Will some humans want revenge? Absolutely. Holzek free, Sarah. Loka verime code a day pristed raid. Will there be voices calling for your species to be punished collectively? You can count on it. But there will also be voices like mine arguing for something better, for actual peace, not just imposed silence. Before I could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. My screens lit up with new contacts. Ships emerging from faster-than-light travel at the system perimeter. Your reinforcements, I said. The Second Fleet was stationed at the Corvin staging area. They have arrived. General Tanaka checked a display on her wrist. She did not look concerned. Right on schedule. On schedule? You knew they were coming? We have known their response time, deployment patterns, and tactical doctrine for months. Remember what I said about being inside your systems? She tapped her communicator. Admiral Vance. Second Fleet has arrived, initiating Operation Closed Door. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations, assuming any survived to do the studying. The Krell Second Fleet was massive. 300 warships including 5 Dreadnought-class vessels that could crack planets. They entered the system in standard battle formation, ready to retake their capital and destroy the human invaders. They lasted approximately 11 minutes. Human ships appeared throughout the system. Not just a few. Hundreds. They had been hiding everywhere. Behind moons, inside asteroid fields, using what my sensors now recognized as sophisticated cloaking technology that made our detection grids look like primitive dowsing rods. But it was not the numbers that devastated the Second Fleet. It was the technology. What are those? Kellix whispered, pointing at the screens showing the engagement. The human ships were deploying weapons I had no reference for. Beams that seemed to tear apart the fabric of space itself, causing Krell ships to simply cease existing. Missiles that could change course mid-flight with impossible agility, weaving through point defense fire like they were dancing. And something else. Something my equipment could barely register. Directed electromagnetic pulses that shut down Krell systems without destroying the ships themselves. They are disabling the fleet, I said. Stunned. Not destroying it. Disabling it. Waste not, want not, General, Tanaka said. Those are good ships. We will have use for them once we reprogram the control systems. Your engineers build solid hardware. It is your tactical software that needs work. Within those 11 minutes, the Second Fleet was combat ineffective. Some ships managed to retreat back to faster than light, but most were dead in space. Their crews unharmed, but completely helpless. This is impossible, I said. Your technology, your ships, your weapons. 3 months ago, you were barely holding your frontier against our advance. How did you develop all of this so quickly? General Tanaka's expression turned serious. We did not develop it quickly. We have had this capability for years. We just did not use it. But why? You could have ended this war at any time. Could we? Your intelligence said you had surveyed 17 human colony worlds for extermination once our military was defeated. You had drawn up plans for systematic genocide. We needed to understand the full scope of your intentions before we responded. She stood and walked to the window overlooking the plaza. We also needed to understand who your allies were, how your supply chains worked, and which of your commanders might be reasoned with versus which needed to be removed permanently. You do not perform surgery with a hammer. Analyst. You use precision tools. We spent 3 months being the perfect victim while we mapped every aspect of your empire. You let millions die. Your own people. Yes? The word was heavy with grief. We did. Every casualty is documented. Every name recorded. Every sacrifice remembered. They died buying time for this operation. They died protecting the intelligence gathering that made this possible. Do you think that decision was made lightly? Do you think General Flynn, General Hassan, and I volunteered for capture duty because it sounded fun? She turned back to me. We did what was necessary to ensure that when we struck decisively enough that this war would end. Not pause, not stalemate, end. Commotion in the plaza below drew our attention. Supreme Commander Grath was being escorted to a transport ship. He was not in restraints, I noticed, just surrounded by human soldiers who made it very clear that resistance would be unwise. Where are you taking him? I asked. To stand trial, along with every other Dominion commander who ordered war crimes. We have been collecting evidence for months, testimony from survivors, recovered communication logs, physical evidence from destroyed colonies. Everyone who gave the orders to exterminate civilian populations will face justice. And the others? The soldiers who were just following orders? Repatriated once the war formally ends. We are not interested in punishing every individual who wore a uniform, just the ones who turned warfare into genocide.
General Tanaka pulled out a data pad and handed it to me.
This is a preliminary agreement for armistice. Your provisional government is being established now, composed of Krell civilians with no ties to the Dominion military command. They will need advisors, people who understand how your military actually functions versus how the propaganda said it functioned. I looked at the document. It was surprisingly fair.
Reparations? Yes, but structured over time in ways that would not completely cripple the Krell economy.
Demilitarization, but not disarmament. Oversight, but not occupation. It looked like something designed to actually work rather than simply punish. You have thought about the aftermath. We thought about it before we started. That is what separates civilized species from conquerors. We fight when necessary, but we fight to reach peace, not to achieve dominance. Over the next several hours, I witnessed the systematic dismantling of an empire. Human forces were already withdrawing from some of the occupied worlds, leaving behind transitional governments and reconstruction aid. Other worlds, the ones that had housed military production facilities or strategic command centers, remained under tighter control. Admiral Vance held a press conference that was broadcast across every network in known space. She stood on the same platform where we had planned to execute 3 human generals and address the galaxy. Today marks the end of the Krell Dominion as a threat to galactic peace. It does not mark the end of the Krell people. They will endure, they will rebuild, and they will do so with our assistance because we understand the difference between an oppressive government and the citizens it ruled. Her voice carried weight, authority, and something else. Compassion, maybe, or at least the possibility of it. To other species watching this broadcast, let this serve as both warning and invitation. Humanity will not tolerate aggression against innocent populations. We will not stand by, while empires built on conquest attempt to expand, whole. But we also will not become the very thing we oppose. We seek partnership, trade, cultural exchange. We seek to build something better than the cycle of warfare that has dominated this region of space. She paused, letting her words sink in across light years. However, let me be absolutely clear. If you attack us, we will defend ourselves with overwhelming force. If you threaten genocide, we will stop you with whatever means necessary. If you mistake our preference for peace as weakness, you will learn the same lesson the Dominion learned today. We are not aggressive, we are not conquerors, but we are absolutely not victims. The broadcast ended. The silence that followed was deafening. That was quite a speech, I said to General Tanaka, who had remained in my observation post. Admiral Vance has a gift for clarity. It is why she was chosen for this operation. General Tanaka checked her chronometer. I need to return to my command, but I will leave you with this. Analyst Vortha. You have a choice to make. You can cling to the old empire, to the pride and superiority that led your people into this disaster, or you can help build something new, something that might actually last. And if I choose to remain loyal to the Dominion, as then, you will have a front row seat to its extinction. Hladbers is. The Dominion as a political entity is finished. What remains is the question of what replaces it. I would prefer it be something sustainable. Hladbers, something that benefits your people rather than sacrificing them for the ego of commanders like Grath. She moved toward the door. Think about it. You have time. Not unlimited time, but some. After she left, I sat in my observation post and watched the humans work. They moved with purpose, but not cruelty. They were firm, but not vicious. They had won decisively, but were not gloating. Kellex approached cautiously. What are you thinking? I am thinking that we made several fundamental errors in our assessment of humanity. We assumed that because they were relatively new to interstellar politics, they would be naive. We assumed that because they came from a single world, they would lack diversity of thought. We assumed that because their history includes warfare, they would be mindless aggressors. And now? Now I understand that they are terrifying specifically because they learned from their history. They have fought each other for millennia. They know every trick, every strategy, every psychological manipulation that warfare can employ. And then they unified and pointed all that accumulated knowledge outward. I pulled up the tactical analysis of the invasion. We never stood a chance, Kellex. From the moment we declared this a war of extermination, our defeat was inevitable. We just did not know it yet. 3 days later, I found myself in a conference room with representatives from a dozen different species. Or the humans had invited observers to witness the formal surrender and occupation proceedings. They wanted transparency, accountability, and witnesses who could report back to their governments. General Flynn, General Hassan, and General Tanaka were all present, now in dress uniforms rather than combat gear. They looked almost normal, which made their earlier tactical brilliance even more disconcerting. Supreme Commander Grath was also present, via secure communication link from the ship transporting him to trial. He looked diminished somehow, as if the loss of his empire had physically reduced him. Do you have anything to say, Commander? Admiral Vance asked. Any final words before formal charges are filed? Grath's mandibles worked silently for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice hollow. I underestimated you. We all did. You let us believe we were superior. Let us think we were winning. And all the while you were preparing this. It was, I must acknowledge, a masterful deception. It was not deception, General Hassan corrected. It was patience. There is a difference. We told you repeatedly that we wanted peace. We offered negotiations. We proposed settlements. You interpreted our desire for diplomacy as weakness. That was your error, not our deception. You hid your true military capacity. We maintain strategic reserves, General Tanaka said. Every military does. The fact that our reserves were more extensive than you calculated is not deception. It is your intelligence failure. Grath slumped in his restraints. What happens now? To my people. Your people survive, Admiral Vance said. Your government does not. The Krell Dominion is dissolved.
The species itself will transition to a representative government structure with human oversight for a period of no more than 20 standard years.
After that, you will be fully autonomous again, assuming you demonstrate the ability to coexist peacefully with your neighbors. And if we refuse, then the oversight period extends until you do not refuse. We are patient, Commander. You have already learned that the hard way. The formal proceedings took hours, but the essential points were clear. The war was over. The Dominion was finished. Humanity had won not through genocide or subjugation, but through tactical and strategic superiority, so overwhelming that continued resistance was pointless. As the meeting concluded, I approached General Tanaka one final time. I have made my decision, I said. I will help with the transition. I will advise the new government. I will do what I can to ensure my people learn from this disaster. She extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. I clasped it awkwardly with my manipulator. Welcome to the peace, Analyst Vorthak. It is going to be harder than the war, but also more important. One question, if I may. Vorthak saw. The trap, allowing yourselves to be captured, the execution spectacle, the perfect timing. If even one variable had changed, you could have died. Was it worth the risk? General Tanaka smiled, but there was sadness in it.
You know what my last words were to my family before I volunteered for this mission?
I told them I loved them, and I told them I was doing this so they would never have to. Every soldier who deployed here, every pilot who flew those ships, every intelligence operative who spent months inside your systems gathering data, we all knew the risks. We took them anyway because the alternative was allowing your empire to continue threatening innocent populations across dozens of worlds. She released my manipulator and stepped back. Was it worth it? Ask me in 50 years, when we see whether the peace we built lasts. Humanity in the Krell Dominion is a threat, Dominion is a threat. Ask the civilians who would have been exterminated if we had not stopped you. They will have the answer. The humans withdrew most of their forces within a month. They left behind advisors, aid workers, and enough military presence to discourage any thoughts of renewed hostilities. But they did not occupy in the traditional sense. They supervised the transition, and then stepped back. They supervised the transition, and then stepped back. It was, I had to admit, remarkably restrained for a species that could have simply taken whatever they wanted. 10 months after the invasion, I stood once again in the plaza where the execution was supposed to take place. The crater from the drop pod impacts had been filled in. The damaged structures had been repaired. A memorial now stood where the execution platform had been, honoring all casualties of the war, human and Krell alike. General Flynn visited the memorial that day. I approached him cautiously. General, I did not expect to see you here. I come every few months, he said, looking at the names carved into the memorial stone. To remember what it cost. Do you regret it? The deception, the risk, the casualties. He was quiet for a long moment. I regret that it was necessary. I regret every name on this memorial. But do I regret stopping your empire from committing genocide across multiple worlds? No, never. My people are still processing what happened. Some see you as liberators, others as conquerors. Most are just confused. Confusion is better than extinction, Flynn said. He turned to me. How is the new government functioning? Better than expected. Slowly, inefficiently, with endless debates and compromises. In other words, like an actual democracy should. He laughed at that. You are learning. Good. We stood in silence for a while, two veterans of a war that had ended not with destruction but with transformation. General, one final question. If we had not attacked you, if we had left humanity alone, would you have remained peaceful? Yes. We have no interest in empire building, analyst. We have enough problems managing our own civilization without trying to rule others. But when you declared your intention to exterminate us, you gave us two choices: submit to annihilation or fight back with everything we had. You made it existential. We responded accordingly. He saluted the memorial and turned to leave. Then he paused. You know what the real trap was, Vorath? It was not the military operation. It was your assumption that because we were capable of violence, we must be inherently violent. That because we could fight, we wanted to fight. That mistake, that fundamental misunderstanding of human nature, cost your empire everything. Learn from it. And with that, General Marcus Flynn walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the memorial to a war that had taught the galaxy a lesson it would not soon forget. The humans had sprung their trap not with weapons but with patience, not with conquest but with precision. They had turned our own arrogance into the noose that strangled the Dominion. And somehow, impossibly, they had done it while leaving room for us to survive, to rebuild, to become something better. I looked up at the sky where human ships still patrolled in slowly decreasing numbers. They would leave eventually. The question was what we would do with the opportunity they had given us. I hoped we would be wise enough not to waste it. Because if there was one lesson the galaxy had learned from watching 3 human generals walk away from their own execution, it was this: humanity had the capacity for overwhelming violence. They had chosen overwhelming competence instead, and that made them more dangerous than any conqueror could ever be.